From local brands such as Orbit Sports to global players such as Nike, Adidas and Puma, Kenya have had more than their fair share of kits. Buckle up whilst I take you through a comprehensive run-through of all of Kenya's shirts from the late 80s to the present day. This Adidas template was first used against Zimbabwe in qualification for the African Cup of Nations. It was used later in the year as they reached the finals of the African Games in Nairobi. The shirts were used in the 1988 African Cup of Nations as well as the World Cup qualifiers against Malawi and Egypt in 1989. They made their final appearance in the 1990 Kings Cup in Thailand. Possibly made by local brand Orbit Sports, Kenya wore this shirt featuring the Kenyan flag at a band across the middle in the 1987 Tour of Iraq. It was seen later in the same year in the CECAFA Cup. Another shirt made by local brand Orbit Sports, this one features the nickname Harambee Stars across the chest. It was also seen at the 1987 CECAFA Cup in Ethiopia. Made by Orbit Sports, this time featuring a vertical band, it was used in the 1988 friendly against Malawi and then the 1988 CECAFA Cup. In 1989, Kenya wore this less fancy Orbit Sports shirt in a World Cup qualifier against Liberia. It made further appearances against Senegal and Zambia at the 1990 African Cup of Nations the following year. Kenya took to the field at the 1990 CECAFA Cup wearing these shirts that had been donated by the German FA. This Orbit Sports shirt, based on the famous West Germany 1988 template, was first used by the under-20s against Egypt in 1990. The senior side wore it in qualification for the African Cup of Nations and then against Nigeria and Senegal in the final tournament in 1992. Now, photos from the early to mid-90s are hard to come by, so there's likely to be some gaps in the history at this point, but the Harambee Stars took on Guinea and Mozambique in qualification for the 1994 World Cup wearing this rather snazzy red kit. Kenya hosted the 1994 CECAFA Cup and took to the field wearing Umbro. In 1995, Kenya became one of the first national teams to wear Nike when taking part in an Olympic qualifier against Nigeria. It was worn the following year in a friendly with Uganda. This green Pro Star shirt was worn in both legs of the World Cup qualifiers against much fancied Algeria. Having won the first match 3-1, Kenya managed to limit Algeria to a 1-0 win and qualify for the second round of qualifiers. These Pro Star designs were first worn in the 1996 Simba Cup against South Africa, Ghana and Australia. They were then used in various games as Kenya attempted to qualify for the 1998 and 2000 editions of the African Cup of Nations. Another possible one-off, April 1997, Kenya wore this Nike shirt in a 4-3 World Cup qualifying win over Burkina Faso. In 1997, Kenya took part in World Cup qualifiers against Guinea and Nigeria wearing this rather dated Adidas equipment template. The design itself was first used by the USA back in 1991, with many other national teams wearing it in the first half of the decade. Towards the end of the 90s, the Harambee Stars wore Puma in a number of fixtures, against the Democratic Republic of Congo and Madagascar in qualifying for the 2000 edition of the African Cup of Nations, in Olympic qualifiers against Tanzania and a friendly with Ethiopia. This other Puma design was debuted at the 1999 CECAFA Cup in Rwanda, where Kenya lost in the final to Rwanda B. It was also used in the 2001 tournament, where once again Kenya lost in the final, but this time to Ethiopia. They competed at the African Cup of Nations qualifiers wearing this kit against Togo, Tunisia, Gabon and Morocco, and his final appearance was at the 2002 Castle Lager Four Nations tournament, where the Harambee Stars took on Uganda and South Africa. This rather plain dark green Adidas shirt was used against Uganda in qualifiers for the All-African Games. Kenya used this set of Nike shirts sporadically. First used in a friendly with Uganda, it saw further use in a World Cup qualifier against Malawi, African Cup of Nations qualifiers against Swaziland and Tunisia, the Castle Lager Four Nations tournament in 2000, and a friendly with Egypt in 2001. Italian brand El Sporto's foray into international football was fairly short-lived, but they supply several teams across Africa and the Caribbean, including Kenya. It's been a challenge to identify exactly when this kit was used and which age group used it, but it certainly made an appearance against Uganda at the 2001 Castle Lager Four Nations tournament, as well as a friendly against Rwanda in Kigali the following year. Kenya first wore this Umbro kit as they won the 2002 CECAFA Cup in Tanzania. It was used against Mauritania and Cape Verde as they successfully qualified for their first African Cup of Nations since 1992. It was used in Olympic qualifiers against South Africa, a friendly with Trinidad and Tobago, as well as games against Bahrain, Iraq and Egypt in a friendly tournament in Bahrain. 2004 saw the long-awaited return to the finals of the African Cup of Nations, with the Harambee Stars sporting some fairly bland kits made by Masita. They failed to make it beyond the group stages, with each kit being used exactly once: green against Mali, red against Senegal and white against Burkina Faso. Following the African Cup of Nations, Kenya went with this striking design for the World Cup qualifiers against Malawi and Guinea. The kit itself features aspects from the Kenyan flag, as well as the badge, but no sportswear brand is identifiable. Later in 2004, the kit was changed to be the mirror image, this time omitting the FA's badge. It saw several outings: the 2004 CECAFA Cup in Ethiopia, as well as the World Cup qualifiers against Morocco and Botswana. 2005 saw a return to Masita and a return to boring kits, not even a badge, this pair being worn against Tunisia in World Cup qualifying. This kit was worn against Eritrea, Swaziland, Nigeria and Angola in African Cup of Nations qualifiers. It appears to be the same as the 2004 design but omitting the badge. Finally, this version was used in an AFCON qualifier with Eritrea before the 2007 CECAFA Cup in Tanzania. Over the next 5 years, Kenya have worn an insane number of dubious shirts purporting to be designed by Adidas. It's worth noting that in 2012, Adidas sued the Kenyan Football Federation for their use of counterfeit Adidas shirts in matches. This particular shirt was used on at least 3 occasions, all World Cup qualifiers against Namibia, Guinea and Zimbabwe. In 2008, they changed to this design for the home World Cup qualifier with Namibia. Its other 4 appearances were all at the 2009 CECAFA Cup. The green, obviously fake away kit was used against Djibouti. A one-off here as Kenya travelled to Iran for a friendly. This kit was seemingly supplied by the home side, featuring the Dai brand. Ali Dai is perhaps Iran's most famous player. His name regularly adorns their national team's shirts. This one-off shirt was used in a World Cup qualifier against Tunisia in 2009. These 2 were later used in World Cup qualifiers against Nigeria, Mozambique and Tunisia. This hoop design was used in the 2009 friendly against Malaysia, as well as by some of the youth sides. This popular design was used for the 2009 CECAFA Cup, the 2010 friendly with Cameroon and for the 2011 Nile Basin tournament. This one-off shirt was used against Uganda in the quarterfinals of the 2009 CECAFA Cup. Presumably the white shirts used against Zambia in the group stages were still in the wash. These kits first saw action in qualifiers against Uganda for the Chan tournament, with the stripes being used against Tanzania in the 2010 friendly. They were used in African Cup of Nations qualifiers against Guinea-Bissau and Uganda and the 2010 CECAFA Cup in Tanzania. Their last use was the 2011 friendly against South Africa. These highly dubious Adidas shirts were used for the remainder of the qualifying campaign for AFCON 2012, as well as friendlies against Nigeria and Sudan. This is where it gets really dodgy. These shirts used against Seychelles in World Cup qualifiers were readily available in markets across Nairobi and were of really poor quality. The striped shirts differ slightly from the previous design and was used away to Seychelles and in a home friendly with Senegal in 2012. I really like this design, great use of colour. They stopped using the Adidas badge and the printing style completes it for me. They were used at the 2011 CECAFA Cup in Tanzania, with each shirt being used exactly once: red against Malawi, white against Ethiopia and green against Sudan. This one-off shirt was used in the 2012 friendly against Egypt and possibly the last use of dubious Adidas shirts. In 2012, Kenya signed a deal with Kelme to be the official supplier for the Harambee Stars. They were used in qualifiers for the African Cup of Nations, World Cup qualifiers, Chan qualifiers against Burundi and friendlies against Botswana and South Africa. This one-off Adidas clone was used for a World Cup qualifier against Nigeria in 2013. By June 2013, Kenya were playing in these unbranded shirts for the World Cup qualifiers against Nigeria and Malawi. They also used them for the CECAFA Cup. Another one-off, here's Kenya wearing shirts by French brand Durig in the World Cup qualifier against Namibia. Kenya were back with Kelme as they hosted and won the 2013 CECAFA Cup. In 2014, the Kenyan Football Federation signed a 2-year deal with Italian suppliers Joma. Shirts were made available through local sports chain Nairobi Sports House. They were first saw use in the AFCON qualifier against Comoros, and they were used regularly over the next 2 years, including the 2013 CHAN finals. Their final use was the quarter-final defeat to Rwanda at the 2015 CECAFA Cup. These all-sport shirts saw action in the AFCON qualifiers against Guinea-Bissau and the Republic of Congo, as well as friendlies against Tanzania and Sudan. The final African Cup of Nations qualifier saw them change to this all-sport design for the trip to Zambia. They were then used in friendlies against Mozambique, Liberia, Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. A one-off all-sport shirt here for the friendly in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's also the only time they wore these green all-sport socks. Another all-sport one-off, almost identical to the previous design, but there's some definite changes with the sleeve design for this friendly against Malawi. Back in 2017, Mafre Sports signed up to supply a whole host of African countries, including Sierra Leone, Zambia and Kenya. There was a big launch, but in the end only the red shirt was used for an AFCON qualifier in Sierra Leone. The result was later expunged after Sierra Leone was suspended by the CAF. Over the next 2 years, the Harambee Stars wore this exciting all-sport design featuring the shield and spears motif from the Kenyan flag. The white away shirt was used for a friendly against Mozambique and in the 2017 CECAFA Cup against Libya. In 2019, they briefly changed to wearing this Macron template. The green was used first, its only outing being a friendly win over Madagascar. The red was used in all 3 fixtures of the 2019 African Cup of Nations, CHAN qualifiers against Tanzania and a friendly defeat to Mozambique. The white shirt was used in all the fixtures as Kenya finished 3rd at the 2019 CECAFA Cup. This completely plain white unbranded kit was used in a friendly against the Democratic Republic of Congo in a friendly prior to the African Cup of Nations tournament in 2019. The Harambee Stars quickly returned to this popular all-sport design, removing the red from the white shirt and introducing the green as an alternative away shirt. The red shirt from 2017 was also used. In 2024, the Kenyan Football Federation announced that they will be going in-house with their kits and launched a design competition. This elegant design is the result. The red and white shirts have both already seen action as Kenya hosted some of the CHAN fixtures. The green has yet to be worn by the senior team.